Hey everybody, it's Chad from NatureBox Pet Emporium. Today we have a very important video now that it's getting a little bit colder outside, but useful for any time of the year. We're going to be talking about heating for your reptile and specifically how to control that heat for your reptile. Stick around. Okay, so let's pretend that you just got yourself a brand new corn snake, ball python, boa, whatever, any animal that typically will rely on a heat mat for its primary source of heat. So here in front of me I have just a selection of ZooMed heaters, or heat mats, the Reptitherm, the under tank heaters. These come from ZooMed. They'll come in like 10 to 20, or actually mini sizes, 1 to 5, 10 to 20, 30 to 40. 50 to 60, and then the tortoise heat mat, which is a big, kind of like the pig blanket warmer. They're really cool. But this in itself is not necessarily enough to keep your reptile nice and warm. This is, for all intents and purposes, a dumb device. You plug this into the wall, and it's on. It's either on or it's off. There's no logic. There's no control within this device itself. So let's say you live in a somewhat warm environment and it's getting too hot, or you have like a very narrow bedding layer and your animal is going to be almost directly in contact with this. It might get too hot. So typically what you need to do is you should consider get some sort of temperature regulator for your device. These come in very wide range of brands as well as price points. So let's go ahead and talk about that. The other thing before we talk about the temperature regulation devices is basically knowing the temperatures. Knowledge is power, and with that knowledge, you'll know what you need to do to your environment. Maybe you need to go up a size in heat mat, or maybe you need to add some supplementary heating. Without knowing the temperatures, you don't know what you need to do. So it's very important that you use some sort of temperature, not temperature, a thermometer, to know the temperature of your environment. These ones are about $7 or $8, and these are the sticky ones that go on the back. It's an analog, basically an old, antiquated technology. It gets the job done, but as far as I'm concerned, that's what I think about those. Spend the extra $1.50 to get the digital one that has a probe. These are very, very worth the extra dollar because you can take this device, stick it to the top, and then move the probe over here, or 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 over there. And then it's just much more versatile. It's not a one stick and you're done. Then you're going to be peeling off that sticker with a razor blade and trying to set it down, and then your snake might get stuck to it, or bedding will get stuck to it. Spend the extra $1.50. Get yourself a good probe, or we even have like the laser pointer ones. Those are great too. My favorite ones, though, the best bang for your buck in my opinion, are just a small digital thermostat with a movable probe. But now we've talked about that, so we have a heating device. We know the temperature that we're hitting. Now we need to know how do we regulate that temperature to where we want it. So now that you know what temperature the heat mat is providing your animal, now we need to know how to regulate that temperature so your animal is kept at the correct temperature. And the main reason is that it doesn't get too hot. Typically, a little cooler is better than a little bit hot. If you're too hot, you could get burned, you could have heat stroke. There's a lot of really bad things that happen with too much heat. Too much cold, reptiles typically will sleep. So it's not the end of the world if your reptile is a little too cold. Ideally, you want it to be just right. It's like, Goldilocks, a little too soft, a little too firm, just right. That's what we're going for. That's why you need a temperature control device to be plugged into your heat mat. So now that you know the temperature that your heat mat is providing for your animal because you tested it with your thermometer, now we need to know how do you control that temperature to get the perfect temperature for your animal. You might be a little too cold, you might be a little too hot, but now we're going to really dial it in with these 4 different devices. We're going to start with the Rheostat. So the Rheostat is the simplest of all these devices on the front. It's the most analog of the digital world. This is basically controlled just with a dial that will allow you to set a feedback or a voltage or a power setting to your heat mat. So this is basically a resistor in there, and you're just dialing this up or down to send power to your heat mat. This one that's made by Emporium Electronics is a little more of a fancy rheostat. It does have some features that will allow you to attach a probe to it, which then will set the temperature to where you actually set it via the feedback from the probe. But if you're going to do that, these ones down here are a much better option, so we'll talk about those. So let's talk digital controllers. The Rheostat is great. It's analog. It's a little bit older of technology. Bang for your buck, and for the best performance, you want to go with digital. This is good. These are better. This is actually cheaper than this, and in my opinion, better. You get more standard features with this ZoomMed ReptiTemp than you do with a Rheostat. But it's definitely the entry-level digital temperature controller. But it's still a very good product. This will set you back about $50. And of course, all of this can be purchased on natureboxpet.com. But why do you want this? You want the digital ones, because these are typically proportional. What that means is that you will be plugging your heat mat into the controller. From the controller, you have a little probe that you set wherever you want to control the heat inside your tank. We'll say right here up on the NatureBox logo. So if we have our controller unit, we're going to run the probe over to the logo, and we're going to say we want it to be 95 degrees on that logo, or let's say 80 degrees, better temperature. 80 degrees right there. We'll put the probe on that, and then of course the heat mat would be right there too. And this will take into account, let's say you get home from work and it's really cold in the house and you turn on the heater. This will compensate for any temperature fluctuations inside of your house. So if you open the door and it gets blasted with cold air and the temperature inside of the tank drops by 10 degrees, this will compensate and ramp up the power that's going to your heat mat, which will help increase the heat. Versus if you had something like the Rheostat, it is just on and off to a point. It's still regulating the power going to your heat mat, but just at where you set it. Not the heat mat itself, it's just on or off. So this is where the digital devices come in super handy. Let's talk about the VE300. So this is another product from Emporium Electronics. The VE300 is where they start to get a little more advanced, a little more cool, a little bit more neat, more features built into the units. So these are, starting at the 300, I believe it is where you have additional features like night drop. Night drop or day and night temperature are extremely handy, especially if you're trying to cycle your animals. So let's say, for example, again, we want the logo to be at 80 degrees during the day, but starting at 6:30, we want it to be at 65 degrees. Products like the VE300 or the Exoterra thermostat, this is the 600, yes, the 600 watt thermostat. These products both have standard features included in them that will allow you to drop the temperature whenever you set it, or wherever you set it to. So you can set it whatever time of the day or night, rather, to hit a separate position where you want it to be. And then the biggest difference between like these two units is the amount of watts that can be applied, or that these will control. This one will control up to 600 watts. This one will control up to 300 watts. All of these heat mats, or if you're using something like heat tape or heat cable, will have a wattage associated with them. This one, if I can find it at a very quick glance, which I am running out of time to find it at a quick glance, 24 watts. This is 4 to 24 watts. So this is, very small if you're talking about controlling 600 watts or 300 watts. These ones are typically good for 100 watts or so. So if you're up in this category, we're talking about controlling like 10 or 20 feet of heat tape that you would probably have on a gecko rack or a snake rack or something like that, where you have a lot of element that you're trying to heat up and cool down. But on to the thermostat, the Exoterra thermostat, 600 watt. This one's really nice. It has had, it's not a secret that Exoterra is not my most favorite brand in the whole wide world, but they do make some really great products. This one is one of them. Cost for function, the Exoterra, the Exoterra thermostat controllers are really good. They're reliable. I haven't had any of these come back to the store, and they just do a really good job. This is another one where you can control up to 600 watts with proportional control, so you can set the temperature whatever you want it to be that will take into account those outside temperature fluctuations, hold it true at whatever you set it to be, and then also have very easily to program day and night drop into this. So that's really cool. Some of the other things that you can get if you go with a brand like Emporium Electronics, some of them will have like alarms that you can set. So let's say, again, you're at 85 degrees, you can set an alarm that will go off at 90 degrees. It'll start beeping at you if it gets too hot. It'll start beeping at you if it gets too cold. There's some of them that you can connect via Bluetooth. So, it's definitely one of those things. You can spend as much money as you want to spend, or you can be as frugal as you want to be. But typically, rule of thumb, I would say allot yourself for about $50 for a real good proportional controller for your heat mats. This is something that's very important to consider when you're setting up your reptile, because too hot is bad. If you're too hot, you're going to get burned. Typically with these, you're not going to have the problem of being too cold, but you can definitely experience a situation where it's too hot. Let's say your snake slithers over to the hot side of the aquarium or your terrarium that you set it up in, but it's right on top of the heat mat. And if the heat mat is just plugged into the wall, it's at 100% juice. And that might mean, it's 130 or something right there. And if you have a baby ball python or a baby corn snake sitting right on top of 130 degrees, it's going to cook itself. So you really need to be able to dial that temperature where you want it to be for the particular animal that you have. And with that, I think I've said just about everything that there is to say about how you control the heat with your heat mat as far as it goes to proportional or analog temperature controllers. Again, make sure that you save that $50+ in your budget when you're thinking about what to get for your reptile. If you're mapping that out, if you're making a budget to pitch to mom, include that extra $50. Don't necessarily just get the heat mats. I mean, there is instances where a heat mat plugged into the wall is fine, but do consider getting a controller, because it's better to have that control than not to have it. Too cool is not necessarily a bad thing. Too hot can kill and burn something. So we hope you've enjoyed this video. If you like it, please consider subscribing to our channel. We're only maybe 20 subscribers away from doing a giveaway, so that's always exciting when we give stuff away. Everybody loves free stuff. Comment below if you've ever had any bad experiences with heat tape, or if you have one of these and you have a preference. Do you like Exoterra, Emporium Electronics? Are you a person that just plugs it into the wall and says, it's good enough for me? I'd really like to get some feedback on what everybody else uses. So thanks for watching. Hit that little bell down there so you get a notification when we have a new video that comes out. And again, have a good one. Hope you had a great Halloween. Up next is Thanksgiving. Don't start celebrating Christmas yet. We got like 2 weeks before it's okay to play Christmas music. Even though I will admit, I may have listened to some yesterday after Halloween. Have a good one.